Ethan and Indigo Smith, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you doing this.
It's an honor to speak with you, and thank you so much for sharing your interest in the nuclear experiment and bringing to my attention that that quote was shared in
Yeah,
that book.
yeah,
Really,
and
really appreciate it.
by Alana Freeland. That's how I found out about you. You write actually geoengineering and the nuclear connection. You state that the complexity of nuclear experimentation is beyond postmodern human comprehension. It reveals our collective inability to consider the invisible, whether they are ethereal substances in the climate or toxic nanoparticles. We simply do not see them. This applies equally to aerial spraying and atmospheric ionization. Unlike nuclear radiation, which can take thousands of years to disappear, nanometals never break down. What inspired you to write those words?
Well, thank you so much again, man. I had been looking into the nuclear experiment for many years. As a youth, I saw my dad and mom participate, and all their peers participate in a protest against nuclear experimentation, and that I think kind of spawned an interest in it. Um, and many other kind of interests entangle and intertwine within the consideration of the nuclear experiment. I uh, really think of it as something so on the cusp of our peripheral perspective and ability to, understand and contemplate even, that I just thought it was a deep subject to look into. It also is so politically relevant and biologically relevant, that it becomes this really important subject that is actually so ignored and not really paid attention to. So the matter of its import and the matter of its low attention, I felt like it was something to look into, that
And
is important.
I'm thinking of the geometry of it. I mean, you're talking about stuff that's so small that we don't think it's important, but in the scheme of things, speak to us about the concept of geometry and this kind of the proportions.
Yeah, well, it's such a little considered topic that we don't actually understand some of the fundamentals of nuclear experimentation. One thing that I've come to understand as a layman, of course, is that when nuclear material interacts with salt water, it literally goes nano. The breakdown because of the minerals in the water is to the point of a nanoparticulate, and that's why, of course, in nuclear cooling facilities and so forth, the water that they're stored in and the water that's used in the reactors is super clean and distilled, if you will. There's literally no minerals in it. So when nuclear material or radioactive material hits seawater, as in Fukushima, designed by GE, on the most geologically active area of the planet. And of course, there were shortcuts made, which made it
I
more
just want to
susceptible.
make clear GE, that means General Electric. That's the company that designed
Yes,
Fukushima.
yes, and they're big in designing many plants, but the nuclear experiment at Fukushima, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's six reactors. It was six reactors. But anyway, the ancient understanding in Japan of where not to build is long, recorded in monoliths variously on the island, saying tsunamis will reach here. Anyway, several shortcuts made in the manufacture and
Well, why don't you
placement of that.
remind our listeners, maybe some young people are watching that don't remember Fukushima. Just give us a wrap up of what Fukushima was, the meltdown, the tsunami.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think tens of thousands of people, I want to say 30,000 people died or went missing after that tsunami in Japan, I believe. Forgive me if I'm wrong. But the I look at it as one of the biggest man-made disasters on the planet, of course, caused by a natural disaster, which the way we've designed things, of course, everyone intuitively understands this if they don't overtly recognize. We design things to where any natural disaster leads to man-made disaster, and so I believe that there were uh, a plutonium reactor, and several, at least one other type, if not three different types of reactors at the Fukushima site. One of them went into what we know as a meltdown. And further, we might consider that it went into what they refer to as a melt out. This also happened at Chernobyl. It's known as the elephant's foot, where the material in the reactor actually melted out. Luckily, it was prevented from going into the groundwater of Europe. Of course, it would have poisoned vast areas of water.
Mhm.
Uh,
I mean, I was in Europe when Chernobyl
oh,
happened.
wow.
I was
Wow.
just a kid, but we were staying
Sure.
in Germany. Is it because of these dangers, though, that your parents protested nuclear energy back in the day?
Yes.
Is
Yes.
it okay? Um,
Um,
the geoengineering connection. Let's circle
right.
back.
Well,
Yeah.
this is, I was thinking before we discussed today, there's two things that I've pointed out about the nuclear experiment that are, I think, pretty simple hypotheses, but are not broadly accepted. The first one is that the influence of energy and heating, and the energy involved in the mining, refining, and the energy emitted in the burning of these materials might contribute to what they call as climate change, right? Putting out all these and all this energy into the environment is, I think, something that's worth considering.
The nuclear energy. You're talking about nuclear
Yes,
energy.
yes,
Okay. So you're
yes.
saying that that could be a kind of accidental geoengineering in a way.
That is just a fundamental thing that I think is not measured. So, and I think it's measurable, right, as it concerns climate change, if you will, or even we might consider it as just the inclusion of more toxins into the environment. Again, just something that they're not measuring.
Okay.
Some of these things, like tritium or tritium, is produced in the upper atmosphere, and it's a naturally occurring radioactive element. Again, that's produced when I believe when sunlight is hitting water vapor particles in the upper atmosphere, tritium results.
Hmm.
It is so easily fused with water that it's basically everything is impermeable by it. And the leaking of tritium is kind of become a just a happenstance of the function of nuclear power generation experiments.
What were the
Um,
you meant
Tritium,
oh, go on, sorry. You mentioned that
please, no.
atmospheric ionization. What were we talking about in that quote?
Right. Well, I don't know if the process that creates tritium is ionization necessarily, but there is an interaction between the light and the water uh, particles and so forth in the upper atmosphere, and tritium does form there. As far as I know, in the environment on Earth, it doesn't form anywhere else, except in nuclear power plants. Of course, it is. I wouldn't even say it leaks. It just it just is dispersed because there's nothing that can really hold it.
Mhm.
It fuses to water particles, and the amount of tritium we had on Earth, of course, before the nuclear experiment was significantly less. Um, that's just one. That's just one example of how complicated the nuclear experiment is, and I think an example of measurable concepts that aren't measured
Are there any
within
other
this.
are there any other measurable concepts that need to be considered in the
Well,
nuclear
sure,
domain?
but that one is significant because they, or I should say, not they, but the people that are pro nuclear power generation will point to it as being a naturally occurring element. It is naturally occurring, but only in the very upper atmosphere because of cosmic influences, and it does not present itself in the environment otherwise. So the first one, I think, back to your question, is that there are measurable consequences of nuclear experiment pertaining to what we refer to as climate change, anthropomorphic effects of on the environment. Um, and now to your question, the second observation I've made that is not widely accepted. There are terms that we use widely. Of course, I mentioned meltdown and melt out. There's also fallout. Everyone's familiar with that. When there were these detonations in the environment, of course, there's been 2,000 nuclear or slash atomic detonations
Test,
on Earth that we know of.
testing. Yeah, testing.
Yeah, testing, exactly. And most of them, of course, were underground. But the term fallout, of course, comes from the detonation of an atomic slash nuclear bomb, and this is the idea where these not only dust and material, but particulate goes into the upper atmosphere and falls out. There is also leftover material in the upper atmosphere that has only recently, in the last decade or so, saturated the atmosphere, and that means that it's spread out equally among the region of the planet. So there is still a lot of radioactive material in the environment. Excuse me, in the upper atmosphere, of course, in the environment. And so I speculated that at first it was just kind of you know asking what is the reasoning for the observations of the chemtrails. What would be the reason to inject particulate into the upper atmosphere? Um, would it would it be to make the material that is not falling out of the atmosphere fall out? And of course, Shasta County is famous for doing many. This is in California, doing many measurements of different localized water sources and finding that there were kind of unexplainable things falling from the sky.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
of it,
If I could just jump in here a moment.
please,
What you're saying is
please.
very true. Dane Wigington, who's an activist in Shasta County, he has worked with it's top labs in California, independent
Mhm.
labs, testing rainwater, testing soil, and finding aluminum metals and toxic nanoparticles off the charts, and a form of that is never found in nature. So the only way that it could be there is if somebody put it there. So that's what you're talking
Right,
about, right? Yeah.
right.
The,
And thank you so much for being specific with that and your knowledge. Um, uh, and so, and a lot of people have speculated on that predicament as being, as pointing to just a total uh, demonic production or release of these chemicals by these planes, which I kind of found that maybe hard to believe that someone would just, for the fun of it, get together a bunch of radioactive material mixed with apparently biological material, being blood potentially and so forth, um, uh, and just drop it from a plane. I speculated that they were um, trying to find a way how to make the radioactive particulate in the upper atmosphere actually fall out.
And what would be the
And
motivation? Why would they want to do that? What are they afraid of?
well, it's at the very least effect of more energy in the environment leads to more significant storms. We can actually see in the last couple of years tornadoes occurring in hillsides and cities and so forth. It used to be that tornadoes only would form on a flat plain. Now they are forming in more varying environments. It would appear.
So
Of
I guess
course,
if I could just jump in, sorry. I guess
please no. Thank you.
what you're saying is that at least an avenue of research that should be done is the effect on the climate from all these nuclear reactors. And
Yeah, I mean,
if we go there, then we have another explanation for the geoengineering, including there's all these new proposals that are constantly being published in science magazines about cooling the planet through atmospheric particulates. And they don't say that they've already started it. They couch it in the language of a proposal, but everybody has seen the evidence in the
right.
skies. Um, but according to this hypothesis that they're doing it to somehow manage the amount of nuclear contamination, are they going to have to do it ad infinitum? Is that something that just
Well, it's a scary thought because, as I was saying, of course, they've demonstrated these nuclear detonation tests, over 2,000 of them, that have caused a bunch of particulate to be injected into the atmosphere, but also the idea that radioactive material, when it hits seawater, it goes into it's so reactive that it turns into nucleized nanoparticles. Well, this, of course, we can understand that rainwater is from seawater, right? The cycle of our planet is circular, and we are in it. We are made up of it. So I try not to pose one, certainty or another, but I do just make um, observations based on facts. I
yeah,
don't know if you saw this. Oh,
oh,
please, please.
no, go on. See what?
Well, something I observed. I think it was about 2 years ago, related to um, the genetic experimentation of the planet. Excuse me, the geomodification of the planet. And
This,
interestingly,
yeah, it's a
there
shock.
seems to be this. Yeah, there seems to be this assumption that it's related to either trying to kill off people or release radioactive particulate. There's this assumption that it's completely negative. I questioned it as, why would they do this looking for some kind of positive means, to some kind of positive end, right? What would be the means that this might be producing? And again, I theorize that it might be to remove this now saturated environment of radioactive particulate from the detonations. When just 2 years ago, I saw there was, and now it's been 2 years, and they still have not released the results of this experiment that was done in the UK. The results, they say at this point still, were not released because of the uh, uh, hype about it that was due to a leak about the title of the experiment. The title,
Are you talking about the therapeutics?
no, the title of the experiment in the upper atmosphere with, I believe it was a form of sodium,
Oh yeah,
um,
in
is
England they
this,
were doing the geoengineering spray.
yes. And it was called,
They announced it in the Guardian that they were going to be doing it 2 years ago. I
it,
remember.
they've done several similar to this, actually, to your point. This one was called Satan, stratospheric aerosol transport and nucleation.
Hmm. Okay,
Stratospheric
yeah.
aerosol transport and nucleation.
How do they
So
come up
my
with these
question,
names? How do they come up
I
with
know.
these names?
Well, it is. I think, of course, it's got a scandalous, taboo name, which was leaked again, and then the experiment became so taboo, and again, people assumed that it was, um, these nefarious assumptions. Which I'm not saying those are not true, but I'm just saying, look at the name. It literally says transport and nucleation. And of course, nucleation means transposition or a transition into a new, right?
Hmm.
Entropy means to change into and decay, if you will. But nucleation is along the same lines. So the experiment
I'm
literally
coming up on
says,
the yeah. I'm coming up with a half an hour. I don't have Zoom premiums, so we just
sure,
got about 5 minutes to go.
okay.
Talk to us about any other writing projects you're involved in.
Well, I write on meditation and sacred
Meditation,
geometry
mm,
frequently. Um,
meditation,
yeah,
sacred geometry.
meditation, sacred geometry, and the esoteric, and the occult. I've been involved with a podcast, The Occult Rejects, recently too,
How can
and
people follow
I'm
your work?
constantly
How can people follow your
Ethan
work?
Indigo Smith. Ethan Indigo Smith is the best way to look me up, and I should be easy to find on most all social media. And I'm frequently presenting articles and YouTubes and so forth.
Ethan Indigo Smith. Before I let you go, I want
Yeah.
to get your take on the possibility of there maybe being a superstorm that fries the electrical grid and causes problems for the nuclear power plants. What do you think the likelihood is of this kind of scenario happening sometime?
Well, great question. I mean, it's very possible. I think, again, as I pointed out with Fukushima, all natural disasters can result in man-made disasters and consequences. We can see too, hopefully these wars don't start spiraling where not only are they destroying the petroleum processing plants, but they're threatening to destroy nuclear power generation plants. That would be horrible.
Are we approaching a
So,
kind of even maybe the possibility of a de facto nuclear war where some of these
well,
reactors are targeted?
it's interesting. Trump claims that he's fighting to prevent the uranium, possession of Iran, and also it's pretty obvious that there's the whole oil war behind it too. So I think the mine, refine, and burn schematic of both petroleum and nuclear experimentation both lend themselves to elitist oligarchy. So what they do is, they operate in their elitist oligarchical manner.
Okay, Ethan Indigo Smith. Namaste. Peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. That was wonderful. Peace, everybody.